All right, everybody, thanks for joining me today for this professional development session. I'm Cody Anthony. I'm a master's candidate in SFA for the principal certification program. Here today we have Jennifer over here on the left-hand side of the screen. This is Randy in the middle, and this is Megan. So this is my audience for today as I teach them about differentiated learning and differentiated instruction. And it's going to be a new topic to all these, so hopefully at the end of the day, when we go through our slides and we talk and watch some videos, that you'll be able to know what this is. Okay, some objectives for today is I want you guys to be able to define what is differentiated instruction. I want you to learn what it is and what it is not. Ways to implement it into your classrooms, what does it look like in your classroom, and some strategies to help you be able to do this. But the overall arcing theme of this is that you will provide instruction for all students, no matter what level they're at. And so by learning today, you'll be able to implement this with any type of student that comes into your classroom. Okay, so in your handout, and I know that you may have some prior knowledge, you may not have any prior knowledge, but these exact same questions are on your handout for yourself. Answer these questions, you can use your context clues of differentiated, what's instruction, and try to come up with some answers. And you can write it down, and we're going to talk about it later on in the day. Just your own thoughts. There's nothing right or wrong right now. Give you about 1 more minute. And that's okay if you don't get done. Okay, if you didn't get done, that's okay. But ironically enough, this slide is something that you could use in your classroom, because when the kids come in for the day, you know what you want to teach them. They don't know. And that's what we're here for, is to teach them. But this is called a tell me what you know type of thing when you come in the door. So for whatever topic you got for the day, if it's in math or science or social studies, reading, if you have some base questions that are aligned to your standards of whatever you're teaching for the day, and you ask these kids some general questions about what you're going to teach. Now, they don't know, but you can find out their prior background and their prior knowledge before you start teaching. That's something that we're going to talk about today too, is that we're going to use a lot of assessing when the kids come in the room through formal and informal assessments to find out what do they know, where are they starting at when they come to me for the day or for the school year. Now that way we can adjust the instruction. So even though you might not know anything right now, or you may not have answered every question, that's okay, because again, this lesson is based on differentiated instruction in the classroom. Okay? So part of differentiating is getting to know your students. So a fun little activity, so you can work this into your class too at different times. It's just kind of like, would you rather, you choice, just something fun for them. But then this gets you thinking, well, what do my students like? So just here, I'll go down the line, give you a second to think about this. If you could pick any ideal vacation spot to go to, out of these four, which one would you pick? So we have a beach, we have a cabin in the woods, mountainous area. We've got an amusement park, this is Disney, or a cruise. So there are four different types of vacation spots. What would you choose?
Beach.
You choose the beach. Randy, what would you pick?
Cody.
Cabin in the woods. Jennifer, what would you pick?
Cruise.
Okay, so 3 different people in the room picked 3 different things. And that's exactly what your kids are bringing to you when they come in the door. They all have different backgrounds. They all got different knowledge. They all have different likes and dislikes. So not everybody's the same. So you cannot expect to teach everybody the same way all the time in the classroom. It's not a cookie cutter program. So when you bring kids in, this right here was just a quick, you find out about your students. And you can apply this to your lesson when you start differentiating, when you start changing how you instruct. Ooh, I clicked too quick. This video is from Carolyn Tomlinson, and she's kind of one of the pioneers of differentiated instruction in the classroom. So she's kind of one, I don't want to say forefather because she's a woman, but she's
woman.
She's a full
but she's one of the leaders in this area, and so she's going to describe what she thinks is differentiated instruction. Oh, or not. Hold on. Oh no. Let's go back. All right, there we go.
For me, I know in my own teaching, one of the things that was really important to me was to stop looking at my class as a group and start looking at them as individuals and realizing that it was not even feasible that exactly the same experience was happening for all those kids when we did something in the classroom. Really kind of look at them with the notion that they come to us with different language backgrounds, certainly with different genders, with different degrees of security, with different past experiences in school, with different levels of self-confidence about the subject, with different peer relationships, a 1,000 things that can intervene in there to affect what happens in a teaching and learning situation. And so for me, differentiation kind of begins when I actually just can make myself look eyeball to eyeball with what's really a pretty scary reality, and that is that room full of kids is different from each other. And those differences make a difference. And if I want to do the best job of teaching that I can spend a pretty good chunk of my career trying to understand those differences and respond to those differences. It's not something you do on a day. It's a commitment to say I can look harder, I can look beneath the surface, I can understand a few more things, I can peel back a little more of the surface than I've been able to do before. And to the degree that I can acknowledge and accept those differences and then start working with them as a part of my teaching plan, I'll probably do better. That for me is sort of a genesis of differentiation, I guess. And so then, for me, differentiation becomes responsive teaching rather than one-size-fits-all teaching. I've looked at the kids, I really understand that the differences they bring shape who they are. And in fact, it's actually, to me, why teaching's interesting. I'd hate to get the same set of widgets in every hour of every day for 35 years. What's so cool is that they are so different from each other and that they do bring that element of unpredictability with them. And if I can really look at those differences and can really wrap around the fact that those differences matter, then at some point, hopefully what I'm going to do is say to myself, you know what? When I teach, I have to respond to those differences. I can't look past them. I have to look at them, and I have to plan with them in mind. That doesn't mean that we jettison the content that we're responsible for. Clearly, we have major responsibilities for content that has important implications for kids, even if you overlook the test part. What it means is we quit just teaching content, and we become keenly aware that we have to teach content to human beings, and in order to transfer that content so that it becomes a part of their lives, we have to teach it to individuals rather than just teach it. And I think that's a hard thing. I think it's a hard thing. I think it's hard enough to just cover the content. That seems beyond us most days because it has to happen so fast and there's so much of it. But differentiation suggests that to get it right, if all we care about is making sure that kids learn, we have to teach individuals the content and we have to make sure that it's working for them.
Okay, so that was just a quick video from, again, I said that she's one of the pioneers in this field. What's one thing that you can pull from her definition or her, overall theme of what this is? Megan?
Just taking each individual student into account, like she said, and like you said, every kid has different language, different gender, different way they act, different home life, different past schools, different past teachers, so they're not going to all be on the same level. So
Okay.
looking at each kid as individual when you are teaching, knowing you kind of got to individualize your lesson.
You got a group of kids that come in every day, but they've got different things that they bring to class every day, whether that's baggage from the house or if that's just their knowledge of what they have for that content area that you're teaching. Do y'all thumbs up? This is something that you can do as an assessment in your classroom. You ask all students, what Megan's statement, if you agree, give me a thumbs up. If you disagree, give me a thumbs down. So if you're in agreement, you can put a thumbs up, and that's some way to quickly assess one that are the rest of the students listening to what she had to say in our discussion, and then you can say, hey, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you get what we're saying? Does anybody else have anything you can pull from that video?
I was going to say what she said about individualization, that every kid is different, so you can't teach them as a group, you have to teach them, like she said, as individuals.
Does that seem hard? Just think about everybody here is a parent, either had a kid that has gone through school or is in school. And think about your own kid going through school or in school now. Would you want a cookie cutter, one size fits all for your student? This is your baby, this is your kid that goes to school. Would you want that for your child?
No, because it's going to be too hard for some kids, too easy for some kids, in the middle for some kids. So you need to have something that will meet each of them kind of where they're at.
There's some type of tiering of where you can try to reach all the kids.
We almost have to assess every single class every day.
That's very good.
Because little girl didn't get enough sleep last night, so today she's drifting and she's not paying attention because she's sleepy, and you got to pick up on that kind of stuff.
Yes. And what he said about assessing is something that you do every day as a teacher. And assessing is not necessarily the papers that you give out or the work that you give. It is just judging, is seeing what that kid has for the day. It could be on a day-by-day basis, but you're constantly doing that. Okay, so just a very neat definition is differentiated instruction is a teaching approach that tailors instruction to all students' learning needs. If that's something you want to jot down, you can. But I think all y'all hit on this is that the teacher in your classroom, you're trying to instruct every student, give them what they need the best way that you can every day, to give them what they need. Okay? And today we're going to talk about what does that look like? How do I do this? Because if you start talking about it, it sounds great on this PowerPoint slideshow, but I'm going to give you some tips on what you can actually do for the day. Okay, again, I'm testing your knowledge. We haven't gone in depth yet, but I want you to do a sorting activity. I've clipped up some statements, and they may have to do with DI, with differentiated instruction, or they may not. And so what I want you to do, as a group, I want you to work together, and grouping, you'll understand as we go through the day, is a big part of how you can provide differentiated instruction in the classroom. So y'all need y'all to work together. Y'all will team up here in a few minutes, not just yet. But on this side of the room, you gotta watch for instructions, is what differentiated instruction is not. So y'all can put this on this table here. On this right-hand side, to match up with my PowerPoint, is what differentiated, I've got it abbreviated, what differentiated instruction is. So on this table, whatever statement you think is what it looks like goes here. What does it not look like will go to there. Again, we just briefly tiptoed on this, so don't get frustrated if you don't get it right, but all right, here we go. All three of y'all working together.
One at a time.
Y'all work together.
Okay, different styles and multiple approaches of content, process, product, environment, and something is. Yeah. Is it where all students complete the, I think grouping where all students complete the point.
No, grouping where all the students complete the same activity.
Oh, yeah, well then,
Isn't.
you do isn't, you do isn't. Oh, yeah, isn't.
Designed for students with higher social. Maximizing learning for all students. Doing more of the same, isn't. Flexible grouping is. Expecting less of struggling students.
No, it's not. You want to find that? No, this would be,
Much just means grouping them all together.
yeah, no, but like grouping, meaning kids who are high here, kids who are low, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Wouldn't that be the same? Or could you want to group kids who are the same together?
yeah. Learning system is increasing, yes. A substitute for specialized services.
No,
Basic.
no.
Teaching standards as separate individual learning.
Yes.
Blended instruction techniques, some hold
Yes.
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 Qualitative, provide rigor and relevance as well as respective tasks.
Yes.
Well,
see, qualitative
No, qualitative.
provides rigor and relevance as well as.
Yeah,
I would say
because
yes.
qualitative means like quality work.
Those are the
Okay, so in our classroom here, I just grouped you up, and there's different, you'll find out today that there's different ways to group kids up in order to provide that instruction that they need. So I was assessing you guys as you work. I didn't say a word. There could be a scenario when we are in groups that, yes, I would provide some feedback to you if you're in the classroom. But I had one initial thought that I wish, me as a teacher doing this training, that I wish that I had done before I turned you loose. So I'm going to ask y'all before I say my thought is, how did the teamwork go for you guys? Anybody have any thoughts or any? This worked out good. This was bad. It was good communication, bad communication. Did anybody dominate the group? What was there anything you noticed?
I just thought that, I mean, we each read it, and then, I mean, there was only a couple that I think that we debated back and forth whether it was or wasn't. But I mean, like I said, we all read it, we all had an opinion, but overall, we agreed on most all of them.
One thing I would have liked to, is there any one of these that y'all questioned the most? Was there one that was
Just
super
that
difficult?
homogeneous group.
Homogeneous group. Okay, we'll talk about that. What I would have done better is when you're going to group kids up. Now you come into class and you know that you're doing something with groups today, and that would be a great way to differentiate instruction is by having different types of groups. But I would have somebody be the leader of that group, and it would change on a day-by-day basis. And so then that way, that leader could facilitate the discussions amongst the others. Okay, that way every kid has a voice. And like I said, you may change it up. You don't necessarily have to pick the most dominant kid in your classroom, the one that talks, the one that's outgoing. You may get that one that doesn't do that and make them be the leader of the group. They kind of get them to talking. That way everybody has a voice, and you just go down the line and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Okay, here's all these opinions. Can we come up with a consensus? So that's something that I wish I would have made somebody the group leader and be in charge of the talking and discussing. So that's one thing that I would have changed. So let's look and see how we did. Okay, I'll come over here to the, was this the knots?
Yeah,
This is what I said?
tell me.
Okay. So the knots, here's what y'all have. Doing only the harder problems. You got that correct. Chaotic. Got that correct. A substitute for specialized services. That is also correct. Designed for students with the highest achievement and grades. Correct. Expecting less of struggling learners. You got that correct over here. These are do nots. Doing more of the same work. Grouping where all students complete the same activities. Got all those right.
Except for,
7.
we put homogeneous. over
Okay,
here.
so the homogeneous one, 3, 4, there's 2 more.
Oh, we put 2 more over there?
Yeah. So the ones that y'all put on the was another way to provide homogeneous grouping. And then this one here, difference, no, that one's right. You got qualitative, blended instruction, that's correct. Choices, that's correct. Maximizing learning, ongoing assessment, flexible grouping, student centered. Okay. The 2 you missed that you put on the
Oh,
is
the other one.
was, one of them was teaching standards as separate individual learning components.
Oh, okay.
But I think,
I think that one's.
we've got a slide on this later on, but you have standards that you must teach every day. You got the TEKS for your classroom. The TEKS tell you what to teach day by day. This is what the kids should know. Here's the standard. Here's the learning outcome. And so that's concrete given to you from the state. You must do that stuff. But can you modify? You're not supposed to modify. Like you can't change the TEKS. You can't change what the kid is supposed to learn. Now you may tier it down or tier it up in case it's too easy for that kid or too low. But you can't fundamentally change the standard for the student. You got to teach them what you're supposed to teach them. So yeah, that one that's an iffy one. And I think that's the hardest thing to try to differentiate is the content. And we'll talk about that. And then this one says another way to provide homogeneous grouping. What's homogeneous?
Well, I thought they were talking about like when you're doing grouping of like, okay, I have all my kids here, you know, who can read, and all
Yeah.
mine who are
Mine
like
is like
emerging
one
readers.
group.
Same.
And
Everything's
all my,
together. Yeah.
well, I thought it meant like providing those groupings when you do each lesson. That's
You'll-
what I thought it was talking
We'll
about.
talk more about grouping, and we call it flexible grouping, where you necessarily don't do the same type of grouping day by day. You kind of mix them up. And you might think that, well, if I keep the kids that get it together and the ones that don't get it together, well, yeah, that's good sometimes, but it's also good sometimes to take those kids that are high and know a lot, put them with a peer who struggles, because I guarantee if you have a kid that you think they know it, but can they teach it? Can they mimic what they're supposed to know to another student, to another peer? That's pretty powerful when you get to that level where the kids are actually helping each other. So sometimes you do want to mix those groups up, so it's not exactly homogeneous.
Are the way these are worded, are these part of their class? Out of your text?
Yes.
So the teaching standards as separate individual learning components, I thought I would have worded that one differently.
Yeah, it's I agree. I know
teaching
you're shaking your
curriculum.
head. Yes.
Teaching curriculum.
Should put the curriculum, should put the
Yeah.
standards in there,
Yeah.
because that makes you think like,
Individual means they need
Right.
help, or they
Yes.
don't need help. That one's kind
yeah,
of.
that's on me.
No,
It's okay to admit that you're wrong. Okay. Okay, some guiding principles of differentiated instruction, and you can just kind of look and we'll talk about it. But assessing students is the thing that you must do before you start this process. You've got to take a look at the kids, whether through its pre-assessment, and pre-assessment that's what we did at the start of this lesson, is when I gave you those 4 questions on your initial thoughts, I was checking, what do you know? And you literally wrote it down. It might be we're talking about fractions, and I say, tell me all you know about fractions, write it down. And we're going to be talking about something specific, and I can just check and see. Okay? But then there's also pre-assessments that we do here at Woden, where there's benchmark testing that happens throughout the year in preparation for the STAR and the EOC test. So as we go through the school year, we do those pre-assessments. That's actually, it's on paper, it's graded, we get data from it, and we can check kids that way. Okay? There's also formative type of assessments that you do day by day in your classroom. So that's the check for understandings, that's the quizzes, that's the homeworks that you give. That's how you're checking day by day to see what that student is or is not learning. There's summative assessments, and that's at the end of a unit. We may have a unit on fractions and math, and then we're going to take a big old test on it, and then that's our summative. Did that kid understand that entire unit that we just worked on? Some other things that you can do to assess students that's not necessarily having to do with work is students' interest. Did we do that today? Did I ask you questions about what type of vacation do you like? Well, you could kind of work it around to understand that kid, because what's most important about finding out about kids is how do they learn. If I take myself, for instance, I coach basketball in addition to teaching, but our head coach, I'm an assistant. The head coach, he can say, okay, we're going to run this play this way, this way, this way. Tell them to cut this way and screen and do this. He can spout it out. And so we're over on the bench. He goes, hey, do you think that's going to work? And I said, I don't know, man. You got to draw it up, because I have to see it. I can't, if somebody says, here's all these steps, let's do this, I can't do it. I have to see something. So it has to be written down visually. I'm a visual learner. Okay? So you may do some questions with kids, and you might find out that Randy learns visually. Then you might say, Megan, do you know if you are written? Do you listen well? Do you write? I mean, what do you learn the best by?
Combination of both.
Oh, superstar. But then some kids are kinesthetic, where they like to use their hands and get up and move. And so you take all these different profiles of these kids. What you've got to learn, you've got to understand them, you've got to build those relationships. And that way you can tailor the instruction to what they need. Okay, then also a learning profile that turns into with that student's interest, where you ask them, how do you like to learn, man? Do you like seeing things? Do you like a video? Do you hear auditory? How do you do it? And so then you assess, and then the adaptability to the instruction is what you do. That's the meat of what you're trying to do. And a big part of it is how you group up kids. And then rigor is how hard or how easy something is. Again, we take that standard that you're supposed to be teaching for the day, and you may make it a little, you may bump it up a little bit, not changing it. You may have a little extra being creative for that student that needs it, but then you may bump the rigor down where that kid still understands whatever standard you're teaching, but it might be at a little bit lower level so they can have success too. I need that air conditioning on. It's 185. There you go. Okay, so assessing students. We talked about it briefly on that previous slide. But there's many things that you can do informally and formally. So informal is where you're watching them. You've taught them, you turn them loose, they're working, and you see if they get it or not. You go around and you check. They may be working in groups, they may be working individually, but you go around and you can verbally say, hey, Jennifer, looking at number 1, why did you get that answer on number 1? And we have a dialogue, and it's okay, how about, let's go back and let's think about that. Or if it's nonverbal, if they have kids sitting there and it's just like they're frozen. Or a lot of times when kids struggle, they act out. It's not that they're acting out because they're bad, it's because they don't know and there's nothing else for them to do. So they act out. So do you see those type of things happening in class? Some little checks for understandings. We did thumbs up, thumbs down a while ago with you guys. You can do that with the entire class. You're instructing, you're presenting, you're giving the content. Thumbs up, thumbs out. Do you understand? Entrance and exit tickets are something when the kid comes in the door or goes out the door, and we've just got through talking about our lesson on fractions. You have a one little slip of a question that you give them on the board, and they write it down on the way out the door. They hand it to you. They leave class. You go back and check. Oh, Megan, she didn't get that right. But then maybe you look and see, well, how the whole class didn't get that right. What did I do during that 45 minutes? I got to go back and we got to fix this. You gonna say something?
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so that's informal things that you can do. The more formal, where you get grades and it's hard copy, you see it, is with those benchmark tests we talked about earlier. There's homework and quizzes that you give, unit tests, there's projects. So those things have a definite grade because you've got an answer key, you got a rubric, you got an expectation of this is right, this is wrong. You can see it and you can give it back to the kids. Okay, on student interest, you spend some time talking to them, build those relationships, do some inventories throughout the day, do some icebreakers to break up what you're doing in class, observe the students, give them a questionnaire. So let's do a student interest icebreaker here. You're stranded on a deserted island. Make a list of 5 items you would like to have if you're stranded on an island. The only items you cannot list are other people. So you can't put you want your husband on there. Okay, so go ahead, y'all fill it out. I got some spaces there on your paper.
Do we know how long we're going to be there?
Infinity.
Okay.
Never coming back.
Changed my mind a few times.
There's no wrong answers.
I know, but the more I thought about it,
Okay,
thought of some
pencils down.
things I wanted.
So I want you changing your answers. Okay. So, a good way to differentiate is to not go, who wants to say what they got? You pick. Randy, what'd you put?
You want them all?
Yeah, go all 5.
Knife,
Okay.
a pot for cooking,
All right.
first aid kit, rope, and a bow.
Very
Nice.
nice. Okay. There's going to be some different ways of going about this.
Makeup, blow dryer.
Jennifer, what did you put?
Water, toilet paper, food, Bible, and a cooler.
Okay.
What are you gonna put in
We're
the
going to
cooler?
get ice.
Maybe it's cold. Sometimes.
Wait, say those again?
Did you get 5?
Water, toilet paper, food, Bible, and a cooler.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so water, toilet paper, you're going to be out within 3 days. No knife for hunting?
Okay. Megan, what did you put?
Water, rosary, snacks, pen, paper.
Okay.
That's 4.
In case I get bored.
In case you get bored.
Well,
Okay.
it's not pen, space, paper.
So,
Water, rosary, and what else?
Water, rosary, snacks, pen, paper.
snacks, pen and paper.
They're gonna
Was
be,
there
they're gonna be
anything
wanting to
that
come to my
had
island.
somebody put that you wish that you had put? Was there anything that you would change about your answers?
As
Remember-
long as I have water.
Remember the teacher said infinity, we're going to be there.
You could be there
Forever.
indefinite amount of time. So here's what I put. I put a Bible, I put a knife,
Fishing post.
a fishing pole, some flint, to start a fire, and then I put a solar powered
Oh,
radio
that'd be pretty cool.
just to like for some entertainment or
Cowboys game.
those cool. Well, not cool. I used to be back in the day. That was ones that
Wind
would
one.
wind up, yeah, and play. So I thought about. I didn't know what that was called.
Fishing
But
pole's good.
anyway, so I started. At first, I thought of like creature comforts. That was kind of where I went. And I was trying to make my list, and I thought, well, I need to live. Like I need to. It's okay if you're not going to be comfortable because you're on a deserted island, but try to think of eating, being warm with fire, a little bit of entertainment. and
Well,
then-
fire, you can put purified water.
Yeah, so this was my list, and again, so we did all this, and so now I can assess that, I know that Randy is thinking in a practical manner of, such as, not saying that y'all are impractical, but saying that he's thinking about surviving with water, food, trying to have a source of eating, and then y'all, maybe not so much with yours, but there's still
I
confidence, you
brought
still got
snacks.
snacks, got Infinity snacks.
Snacks and
got
water,
the-
okay?
The cooler's okay too.
I got those those foods that Chad uses, you know, those dehydrated
Yeah,
ones.
yeah.
Reese.
Yeah. that's
MREs.
That's what I'm gonna
There you go. See, okay. So y'all being very practical. So that's something that you can do with your kids throughout the year, throughout the day. That you're getting bits of information. Hey, it's fun. They're gonna like doing this stuff, but you're picking up information as they talk. So all right, we got all this information. Now what do we do? So what you got to do is, well, that block's there. Is you're going to start differentiating the instructional elements of your classroom. And the way you do it is by taking these three different sections, the content, which is what students learn, okay? And then here's the process is how do they do it? How are the students going to learn? And then the product is how they're going to show you what they've learned. So these elements is what you differentiate when you're teaching. So the content is what the state gives you. That's the lesson for the day. It's the standard of the TEKS. How can you manipulate that to reach all students? Because we're trying to tailor instruction to all students. The process of how do they learn it. We'll see some examples here later on. And then the product, I think this is the easiest one to do as we go through examples here. Next couple of slides. Here's a little video about differentiated instruction.
Hello and welcome to Teachings and Education, Differentiated Instruction. Use differentiated instruction to meet the diverse needs of your students. Now, why should educators differentiate instruction? Well, here are several reasons differentiated instruction should be used in a classroom setting. First off, research has shown us that individuals are better at learning information through different modalities. Differentiated instruction allows educators to cater to learning styles. Next, you must differentiate the rigor of the content because students differ on performance and readiness level. We also recognize that some students will find certain material engaging while others will not. Teachers should differentiate activities as student engagement varies. Let's just say a teacher is giving a lesson on macromolecules. Some students will, quote, get it automatically, while others will feel lost. Teachers may have to differentiate because not all students learn the same material in the same time period. And let's not forget some of the specific types of students in the classroom. There are students with disabilities that require differentiation through modification and accommodations. Also, English language learners. So, how do you actually differentiate instruction in the classroom?
Okay, so we know that kids come with all different walks of life, and it's our job to try to reach out to every one of them. So differentiating the content is taking the same concept or standard again from the state of whatever lesson we've got for the day that we should be teaching every kid, but we may differ how it goes for each kid. And I think this is the most difficult aspect to do because you can't change what you're supposed to be teaching. You can't give them something like if we're supposed to be learning about fractions, I can't just go, well, he does not understand fractions, so we're not even going to teach him that for the day. He's going to go learn something else. That's not what you do, is that you put it down to their level to where they can find some success. And good ways of doing that is having a variety of materials available for the student. Again, we learned about that people learn in different ways, whether it's through video, through its audio, if it's through kinesthetic type movements, if it's from something being seen or where they draw or write. So you got to put them to that level by modifying what you're giving them so that they can have success. Now the next element is differentiating the process. It's taking that same concept or standard to each student, but you got to make it make sense to that kid. Okay, and one of the easiest things to do is to use learning stations, to use centers. I know that in my kids' first grade and kindergarten classes, that's something that they use to teach whatever topic it is. But what you would do is put different stations around the room at different levels and have the kids go around and learn the material that way. That way you might have a group on your own that you're working with. You might have a different station where they're exploring on their own with a Chromebook. There may be something else where they get to work in a group and they get to have feedback and talk. So grouping students and having them move around and talk and be able to do different things is one of the easiest ways to differentiate the process of how do they learn. Here's a little classroom here.
Look at these great volunteers. Go ahead, Sam. Yes, nice job.
So the impact of differentiation, the students feel successful. They feel supported. They know if something is difficult for them, there's something that's a little more in line with their strengths coming up soon. So it really makes education fun and approachable. I really think it's the most effective way that I have seen to teach.
The vision and the mission of Highlander is to use innovative practice as a social catalyst. We want our kids to be able to do anything any other kid from Providence could do.
We use differentiation all across the curriculum here at Highlander, and especially in the first grade. Although the content is the same, having the stations really allows me to tailor my lessons to each individual group of learners. So how the differentiation looks in my classroom, we start off with the whole group lesson. So let's get our reading glasses on. Let's get the letter part of our brains activated. This section of our curriculum, we have been looking at nonfiction texts. When we're looking at our book today, we're going to be thinking about where we can get information. And then in the phonics realm, we focused on contractions.
We're taking two words, and what are we sticking them together with? Apostrophe.
Yes, Karen. And then we break off into our small groups. So our yellow group is still learning how to do a lot of our literacy things. The green group is doing pretty well, but has a few things to work on still. And our blue group is hitting all the first grade standards.
So do you see how she was able to group where it wasn't necessarily demeaning to the kids, but she was able to give them specific instruction based on where they're at with what they know and with the content. So she just labeled it by colors. Here's a yellow group, here's a green, here's a blue. And then they go around at these different stations and they learn in a variety of different ways. Here's kids with Chromebooks, and it's audio and it's visual and it's videos and it's games, and then later on in the lesson she goes through where she pulls them in 3 at a time, and then she gets to provide that small group instruction, and that's really beneficial to those students that need one-on-one, but you necessarily don't have the time to give them one-on-one all the time. Okay, and at the end, differentiating the product. So this is the end result. You have gave them the content, they've gone through the process of learning it hands-on themselves, and then here's the end result. And you can, this is the easiest way to differentiate because there's a variety of things that you can do. And you want to try to be creative for those ones that need that upper level boost, that harder, that rigor, that's at a higher level of thinking order. And so one thing you can do is, this next slide here is, if you offer kind of a choice sheet for kids. Now all this has to do with weather, So it's whatever the TEAC is, whatever the standard is about weather. But you notice there's 9 different options. And it's not just, I've given you a test and here you go and get after it. But there's a chance for them to make a song about weather. Here's a chance for them to make a PowerPoint, to write a story, to create a movie. So this is all different things that you can do. You choose, for the kids get to choose, but this is all something that you've got a rubric and a standard for, and they pick and they can do it. So they can make it as hard as they want, or if there's kids that struggle, they can pick something a little bit easier, but yet they're still showing you what they know for the end product. Another example is tic-tac-toe, where you say, okay, you can choose anything you want, but it must equal 100 points. And so obviously the stuff that's worth higher levels is worth more points. So that way if a kid, again, wants to be super creative and show you what they know at the end of a unit or end of a lesson, they can pick whatever they want. It's worth a variety of points. And so you've differentiated because you've allowed kids to choose their learning style, the product of what they know. Okay, so what does that look for? What does it look like in my classroom? The first thing to think about is you can't do everything that we've talked about at one time because you're going to fail. It's too hard to do. Okay, pick one thing that you think that you can change, and it might be one thing for one classroom, and do that and see how it goes, and then assess it. Can you fix it? Did it go okay? Okay, then try that in your other classes. Okay, so just take it one step at a time. You don't have to completely change, reinvent the wheel of what you're doing, but pick pieces out of certain lessons, and it might not be every day. It might be on certain days that you can do this. Okay, but just don't feel overwhelmed that you must do everything that we say all the time. Like your entire lesson must be differentiated. Start small and work your way into it. There's plenty of resources online on YouTube. I know that there's got to be some teachers around the hallways that you can ask, and you got to make sure that your classroom is set up to be user-friendly, because if you're using a lot of group action, if you look around my room right here, I've got kids individualized up, but I'm in high school, but sometime during the semester I know that I'll turn some desks around and make groups of 2s and 4s, because I like for those kids to talk and be active in group work. It's going to take some work on your time, okay? It's important that you have good classroom management skills in here, because kids will be moving. And there's a lot of student-centered learning going on where kids are doing the learning and you're not just up here lecturing, okay? So having expectations and preparations and procedures for the kids, such as when you have group work, who's the leader? Who's the material person? Who's turning stuff in? That's things that you need to plan out. You need to plan out your groups. Are you going to mix them up? Is it going to be kind of the higher level, middle level, lower level type kids? You have to think about these things before you turn them loose on day by day.
But the fourth point that's up here is the one that I want to challenge.
I know that I'm running over time, so I don't want to eat up your time here. Up here on this PowerPoint is left-hand side is a traditional classroom, and you can see if you go from left to right how it looks from what you typically think about in the classroom to what a differentiated classroom looks like. And what you'll see is that there's choices, there's grouping, there's engaging tasks for all. I think what I like the most is these bottom ones. It says success refers to the individual's growth, not necessarily what the class does. If the whole class did good, well, how about all the kids? Did all your kids do good? And fair doesn't mean that everybody works on the same task. Fair means that it's tailored to that group of kids. Okay? So to wrap up, is there any questions before I turn you loose on your final thoughts? One thing I want to add is that don't misunderstand that you must provide individualized instruction for every single 22 kids in your class. What's the easiest way to provide that type of instruction for, let's say you got a group of 22. What can you do to make sure that each kid is getting something without having to go kid by kid? The biggest part is to group them up. You do those assessments. Small group them up. You got 3 different levels. Okay? So here's what I want you to finish up is go back and answer those questions that you did from the start. It's the exact same questions. And I want you to compare them from what you did at the beginning. And then as you're working, I'm going to pass out this evaluation form where I would like for you to evaluate me on,
Failed. Just kidding.
on my performance for the day. Okay, if you don't have any questions, that'll wrap up our PD for the day. I thank y'all for coming in and being a part of my classroom.